A persistent piece of legislation comes up again. Paid sick days are probably going to get another vote. Plus, we check in with former Lieutenant Governor Michael Fedele and see if his future includes any time in Washington, D.C. And autism advocates are creating their own options for support and care of children affected by autism spectrum disorder. A look at a very unique tennis camp this summer. Hi, you're watching The Real Story. I'm Lori Perez. The much-debated bill that would mandate paid sick days for thousands of Connecticut workers is going to possibly be changed to cover fewer workers. The bill could now read as applying only to service workers at companies with at least 50 employees. Now, some say if that change is made, it would mean manufacturers, tech industries, and other companies would not feel it as much of an impact. The Senate is going to be up first to take a vote. Supporters and opponents have been making their cases. And here now to continue the discussion is John Green. He's the executive director of the Working Families Party, and Kia Morrell, assistant counsel for the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. Thanks, both of you, for being here. You both have been here before and been passionate advocates for your causes. I guess, John, if we could start with you talking about if this kind of a change were made, why would you be willing to make that kind of a compromise, and how would you see that it would affect the number of workers?
Yeah, well, what we've said all along is that what's important about this proposal is to make sure that the people who are watching our kids in daycare centers, providing home health care services to the elderly, serving food in restaurants, don't feel that they're pressured to come to work when they have an illness for fear that they may fall behind on their payments, paying their bills, or even, God forbid, lose a job. Because that's not only unfair for those employees, it's a real public health risk when people who are, providing services to the public and particularly vulnerable populations, feel that they have to come to work when they're ill.
So why didn't you tailor the bill that way to begin with?
Well, I'll tell you, I've had a whole series of interesting meetings over the past few months, including many with employers and manufacturers. And the truth of the matter was that when we sat down with manufacturers, I'll give you one example, a group of manufacturers in the New Haven area. And one began by saying, this bill's going to cost us a lot of money. And we said, well, let me ask, what kind of benefits do you offer now? And this person said, well, we already provide 2 weeks paid vacation, 5 paid sick days, 4 personal days. And I sat there and scratched my head and said, you realize this bill doesn't affect you at all. Mm-hmm. And I think at a certain point, there's just not enough hours in the day to have those conversations with everyone who, for whatever reason, has a misperception about how this bill might impact them. So the benefit of focusing on service sector employees is really two. One is that those are, after all, the employees who are at risk to come to work with illnesses and interact with the public. So from a public health perspective, that's really what our focus has been all along. Secondly, and I'm sure Kia will have a chance to have her views heard too, but one of the things that some legislators had been concerned about is, we don't want Connecticut to be at a competitive disadvantage. Mm-hmm. Well, service sector jobs aren't competing across state lines. A school bus company in Connecticut is not competing with a school bus company in Arkansas. Restaurants in Connecticut are not competing with, restaurants in Iowa. Mm-hmm. They're competing with the other side of the strip mall parking lot. So what we're doing here is setting a basic standard that applies to service industries just in Connecticut. They're not being put at any disadvantage. We're just basically saying we're not going to have a race to the bottom. We're going to set a floor so that companies that want to do the right thing don't feel the pressure to erode benefits or to not offer benefits that they think their employees should have.
So, Kia, does limiting it, does that seem amenable to you? And is he right about that focusing on this sector of workers, isn't a competitive disadvantage?
Well, I'd say no, no, and no. Simply put, in the 4 years that this bill's been debated at the Connecticut legislature, I will say that although I appreciate that John went out to a New Haven area manufacturer, we represent at CBIA more than 10,000 businesses around the state. We've never once been approached by John or anyone working with him to get the real perspective of what businesses' argument and opposition to this bill is. Had they spoken to us at any point, they would understand that it's a twofold argument. One, this is not about public health, it's about jobs. If it were about public health, we would all be sick all the time. The reason we are not is because so many employers in Connecticut already offer time off benefits. Many offer paid time off benefits. Some call it sick time, some don't call it sick time. But even for those that don't pay for the benefit, often they allow flexibility in shift scheduling, flexibility in work hours, and a variety of other mechanisms that a one-size-fits-all policy simply cannot address. The issue for the service worker amendment that we've heard so much about, but I will admit it's not been shown to me, so I don't have the benefit of knowing what it is or how many job categories it would apply to, is that the very workers that John purports to want to help are the ones that work in industries that operate on some of the thinnest of profit margins. If you are in a service-oriented industry, many times you are in a right here, right now industry, which means if you don't have the service, you don't have the product for the customer at that minute, they leave and they go somewhere else that does. No business operates in a vacuum or in a silo. So that means that although, to John's point about the bus company or the restaurant competing with the person in the strip mall across the street, what you'll find is that they may not compete directly with anyone in Iowa or across the country, but they do compete by way of where do their products come from. Who are they a supplier of? Who are they a subcontractor of? Who are they affiliated with or have a relationship with? If their costs go up, those costs are passed on to the others that they work in tandem with. So again, no business has the luxury in this state or any other that I'm aware of operating without regard to what's happening in the rest of the business community. For those few businesses that may no longer fall under the service worker amendment that John mentioned, what you'll find is that the vast majority of those businesses already provided the benefit. So they were never in opposition because they had to provide something they didn't provide. The nature of their opposition is the fact that this bill would limit their flexibility if and when the economic situation they operate in changes. They no longer have the flexibility to hold on to jobs by reducing benefits or negotiating
So
them.
why isn't that a valid point? I mean, especially we're hearing so much about the budget. We were just talking about it. We're hearing so much about businesses having trouble in Connecticut. A lot of people call it business unfriendly. I mean, why not let employers have the flexibility to make their own decisions about how they're going to care for their workers and their health care?
Well, he is right about one thing, which is that the majority of manufacturers do provide more generous benefits. And so to some degree, I don't disagree that whether they were covered or not was really not a big impact for them or a big part of the bill. See, where she's wrong, though, is that the businesses that don't provide these benefits are operating on small profit margins. Let's take a few examples of service jobs and service companies. Walmart, $5 billion in profits. Target, $2 billion in profits. Starbucks, $1.1 billion in profits. No paid sick days.
So what about that, Kia? I mean,
what I would say is the vast majority of businesses in Connecticut and really in this nation are smaller businesses. They are not Walmart or Target. They are the mom and pop business, the guy that cuts your hair or sells you your bagel in the morning. Mm-hmm. Those folks do not have billions of dollars to play with, and anything that increases their costs, particularly in an already bad economy, is a difference in keeping their doors open or closed, jobs or no jobs.
Okay, well, right here we're seeing the nature of the debate, and we know that we're going to be following it over the next few days, if not the next few weeks to come. Thanks, both of you, for being here. Very interesting, as always. Up next, former Lieutenant Governor Michael Fedeli is here to tell us his view of the new administration at the Capitol.